Who is David Bentley Hart, and why has Jesus captured his imagination? Hi, I'm Lisa DeLay. Welcome to the channel. There's a theologian, a philosopher really, whose work has been quietly unsettling some of the most deeply held Christian assumptions in theology for the last 2 decades. His name is David Bentley Hart, and if you've never heard of him, buckle in. Things are about to get interesting. Though his ways of communication often seem too arcane and inscrutable to help ordinary folks, I want to reveal his ideas because I believe his revelations have the heft to connect us very deeply to God and to each other and to the natural world. So who is David Bentley Hart? He's a convert to Eastern Orthodox Christianity. He translated the entire New Testament from Greek, and he writes about difficult ideas that really matter. The New York Times recently published a long interview with him and columnist Peter Werner, and I want to break it down into simple chunks to expose its brilliance. As you absorb what is conveyed, I hope that it will change your life. Many of his ideas have changed mine. Over the next few episodes in this short series, I'll walk us through the most scintillating points because I believe what Hart says should be distilled for ordinary people, especially for those people who are exhausted by the antics and the failures of institutional church and the Christians who aren't like Christ. So let's start at the beginning. Who is this man and what drew him to the Christian faith in the first place? You might call him a reluctant believer. David Bentley Hart has described himself as a thoroughly secular man, someone who has, in his own words, very little natural appetite for religious sentiment. He was raised Episcopalian and became Eastern Orthodox in adulthood. But he's always felt that things like institutional religion, dogma, and the romance of churchly piety, none of that had much interest or sway for him. And yet here he is. He's one of the most serious and consequential theological minds of our generation. So what changed? This reluctant convert, David Bentley Hart, notes that it came down to 2 things. First, he couldn't shake the historical strangeness of the early Christian claims about the resurrection. He studied other messianic movements in first century Judea. When a messianic figure died, his followers scattered. That was the pattern every time. But Jesus was different. Something different was happening. His followers didn't scatter. They regrouped, and they came back claiming to have had an experience that changed everything for them. Hart found that historically anomalous in a way that he just couldn't explain away. But that was later. The first thing that gripped him was actually simpler than that. It was something I also find really compelling, which is why I'm doing this series in the first place. It's the uncanniness of the person of Jesus himself. So what made Jesus actually radical? Hart grew up with a good classic education, and he knew about ancient literature and ancient culture well. And what struck him was that many of the things we now find morally appealing about Jesus were actually considered wrong or scandalous in their own time. Jesus had the kind of philosophy that would be considered backwards. Take forgiveness, for example. The idea of extending radical, boundless forgiveness to enemies, not friends and family like we might expect that makes life easier, not just opponents, but people who had done real harm. The love of enemy idea Jesus offers was not a virtue in the ancient world, not even among the Stoics with their moral philosophizing, not even with the Hebrew prophets. Jesus bordered on foolish in this way. And here's a second example, the care for the poor. In the ancient world, there was a category called the deserving poor, people who had fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. You might help them. But there was another category, the category called tochoi, which is Greek, the word that's used in the Beatitudes that Jesus talks about the new kingdom. These were the most wretched, the most abject people in society. And the common cultural consensus was basically minimal charity, nothing more. They were considered too unhelpable. Jesus made them the absolute center of his concern. Jesus didn't just help them, he declared that the kingdom of heaven was theirs. David Bentley Hart calls this the uncanniness of Jesus. He's a figure who doesn't fit well anywhere in history. That standout strangeness, Hart says, is what first captured his imagination, and it's never let up. So here's why that matters for us. Christianity is originally scandalous. There's something really important about how we read the Gospels, or maybe how we've stopped reading them. Over time, we've domesticated Jesus. We've made Jesus comfortable and familiar. His teachings have been folded into the ongoing background of Western culture so thoroughly that we've lost the real sense of just how strange, how disruptive, how genuinely offensive some of what Jesus said would have been to the people hearing him. Hart's point is that this strangeness is the whole point. It's evidence of something. If Jesus were simply a product of his time, a smart rabbi reflecting on the cultural values around him, you could explain him away historically, but he just doesn't fit. And that friction, that uncanniness, is part of what makes Jesus worth taking seriously and learning more about him. Whether you agree with Hart in all his conclusions, that doesn't really matter here, because you can find this framing powerfully useful, because it invites us to slow down, truly encounter Jesus as a historical figure rather than a cultural mascot for whatever we've already believed. In the next episode, we're going to go somewhere much harder. David Bentley Hart's take on evil and suffering, and why he thinks that most attempts to defend God in the face of tragedy actually do more damage than good. It's one of the most honest things I've read on this topic, and you'll really appreciate it. It created a huge shift for me, and I think it might for you too. So, what made Jesus compelling to you? Was it something about his teachings? Was it his actions? Was it his history? I hope you'll tell me in the comments.